All right. Committee members, this meeting's being recorded. Folks who are tuning in, if you're watching this recording, we are so glad that you're watching it because that just demonstrates your commitment to this process. So welcome, folks. We are going to continue to pick things up with our Charter Review Committee for Multnomah County. My name is Allison. I'm your facilitator this evening. I'll take us through a couple of Zoom logistics and then I'll pass it off to your co-chairs. We'll take care of some committee business and then dive into our agenda. So folks are already doing it, but it's lovely to see your faces. Y'all are muted. That's great. We'll continue to mute throughout our meeting. I also want to note that I was just talking about it before the meeting started. There's a lot going on. And it seems like, at least in some of my circles and speaking for myself, some particularly challenging things have been happening. It's also changes in our broader, mask mandates lifting, things kind of moving and changing, maybe for the better, maybe in terrifying ways for other folks. So tonight, we so appreciate you showing up. I appreciate you showing up and continuing to put your effort to this process. And more than anything, take care of yourself tonight on this Zoom call. So if that looks like you need to lie down on your couch so that you can be present mentally, and you would prefer to have your video off, that is totally cool by me. I think tonight's format of our meeting will also support that, and that we don't have a lot of large group discussion activities this evening. If it helps for you to stay on camera and to be present, that's awesome. If you've got kids or family or dogs in the background and chat is the best way for you to participate this evening, that also works. I just ask if folks can change their chat settings from host and panelists to everyone, and that will ensure that the folks who are tuning into our meeting can also follow along with any conversation or comments that we have in the chat. And I'll do my best to elevate anything that's kind of relevant for the group discussion from the chat if that is distracting for you. For folks who are tuning in to observe this evening, I'll maybe say this again later on, but we are going to keep the chat just for committee members this evening. So committee members will use that as a way to communicate with each other, with the facilitator, with staff, and we are going to open up Q&A for folks observing. So that should be located in a button at the bottom of your screen, and it'll pop up and you can put in questions in there. If we might not be able to answer all of the questions in the meeting tonight, but we want to be able to document them and hear what you have to say if you do have any questions that are coming up for you. Group members, I know that chat can also get sometimes kind of wild and fun. Also, just to be mindful of that. So folks who are trying to multitask and listen to the verbal comments as well as follow along with the chat, myself included, that we're just thinking about our use of that so that there's not a ton of conversation in the chat and some folks get left out along the way. If I start to see that happening, I'll gently point that out. And if we do need to pause or just open it up for more conversation or take a minute to read through the chat comments, we can certainly do that throughout our meeting. We did spend some time going through and developing group agreements. I'm not going to share all of those tonight, but I just want to remind folks that we have them. I'll be monitoring for sort of adherence to that. And certainly if there are impacts being felt in today's meeting or things that, process that doesn't feel nice or a comment that maybe lands for you in a certain way, you can reach out to me during the meeting. You can also reach out to your tri-chairs. That's Teresa, Mark, and Ana del Rocio, if you'd like to talk anything through process-wise. All right, I think that's all my housekeeping bits. Oh, and also some folks have already done it, but if you'd like to drop your pronouns into your Zoom name, that'll help me and I think each other just to make sure that we're using folks' right pronouns. Okay, so with that, Teresa, I'm going to pass it to you.
Yeah, for sure. So welcome everyone once again, and welcome public members watching this meeting. It's great to see you all on a Wednesday evening. So looking over the agenda, I know we said 15 minutes for a Zoom logistic and agenda overview, and we are literally faster than that. So it's chill. So reviewing the agenda, we got public comment next, and we have Annie. I know Callie sent us an email with a written comment beforehand. And then after that, we'll have the subcommittee report outs. So just a reiteration once again, each delegate from each subcommittee just share key actions, areas discussion, next steps, and anything else as well. And then to provide a sense of transparency among the tri-chairs, we'll do our own report out as well at the end. And then after that, we'll take a break. So yay on breaks. And then we'll go into, I feel like is our main event for the night, which I know a lot of committee members are excited about, which is a panel discussion with the Portland Charter Commission. And we'll be speaking with a few commissioners from that body. And we'll first start with some more general questions, but feel free to draw in more of your questions as we get into that discussion too. So that's really all for the agenda. And now I'll pass it off to Mark for public comment, introducing that. You're muted again, Mark.
Yeah, there we go. All right, thank you. This is an eternal problem for me. We have received some public comment. We had one, I believe, one written comment sent to us, and perhaps I can find that somewhere handy.
Mark, it's in front of me if you want me to read it out for folks.
That would be very useful. Thank you, Colleen.
Great. So we had one comment submitted, and it's a short one. So instead of summarizing like I often do, I'll just read the whole thing because it's probably a better way of portraying what was said. So this was submitted by Kevin Machis, and sounds like matches. Sounds like Donovan knows this community member, so that's helpful. Thank you. So by Kevin Matches, and he wrote, prohibit all funding and staffing contracts between the district attorney's office and outside entities, such as Clean and Safe. A conflict of interest this blatant would be illegal in many parts of the world. It is sad that Multnomah County officials even need the charter to be revised to prohibit such a ridiculous practice. These dangerous practices have been covered in the media, such as here, and there is a link in the comment to a news article, which I won't read, but I will share the comment in the chat so that people have it available and can review if they would like to.
Thank you, Colleen. Is there any other public comment that we've received in written form? And is there anyone wishing to speak to the committee this evening? Hearing none.
Just wanted to note, Carol, if you would like to give public comment, you can raise your hand. But also totally putting you on the spot. And if you're just tuning in, this is the time when we're asking for public comment. If you are here to give public comment, you can raise your hand. All right, I'm not seeing any hands, Mark.
Okay, thank you. Next is subcommittee report outs, and would you like me to ask the folks responsible to do this? Thank you. Maya, would you like to start?
Yes, I can start. Just to clarify, I will be reporting out for the Community Engagement Committee, and Jude will be reporting out for the Accountable Government Committee. So in terms of community engagement, a couple of things. We are exploring the ability to get funding to help us with public outreach, as well as some social media and surveys. We are also through county staff working with the communications department of Multnomah County to sort of identify the things that we would like the public to know in the meantime, that the communications department or the Office of Community Involvement can tweet about or post about. We also had a request for a presentation that Mark and I went to. We went to the Multnomah Neighborhood Association and we presented to them about the process. It turns out that their chair, Moses Ross, is a former Multnomah County Charter Committee member, and he spoke with them afterwards, and he is willing to come talk to us if we want to hear from any former charter committee members about their experience. So that's pretty much it, unless Jay, you have anything you want to add.
Our first, well, thanks Jude for making some social media graphics. Those are now live. So if you go to our Facebook for the county Office of Community Involvement, and even just the Multnomah County Facebook page, you can see them. You have to scroll down a bit for the county. They just post so frequently, and then share it out. I think just a few of us have shared it, but it just is a really nice 101 on what the county charter is about, and they look great. So it's our first little bit of info out. Other than that, nothing new.
Great, thank you, Jay. Jude, would you like to speak next, please?
Yeah, and I'll be reporting out for the Government Accountability Subcommittee. We met in March 3rd, where we heard from the Multnomah County Auditor on some proposed amendments. We also spoke about or discussed gender neutral language, which I hope will come to the larger committee in the next agenda or the agenda after that. I'm looking at you, Callie, you know more than I do. And then we're also meeting tomorrow, where we will be listening to Danny, actually, from the Office of Community Involvement. And Maya, am I forgetting something here?
No, the only thing to add is we have talked about wanting to hear from some former charter committee members. So we and I think that we might be hearing from Carol in our next subcommittee meeting, which may be the reason why we're not hearing today. And then potentially we'll be hearing from Moses Ross, who I mentioned, and maybe some other people if they're interested in talking about their experience. Otherwise, I think that covers it.
Thank you. And next committee to report out would be, and I'm waiting for someone to volunteer. Samantha.
Thank you, Mark.
Thank you.
I will give a high-level report out, and also I'm grateful for subcommittee members to pitch in and add things that you find are particularly of nuance that you want to lift up to share with the full committee. But this month we met twice in our bi-weekly meeting schedule. At the February 21st meeting, we revisited values, racial equity questions, and looked at topics and guests over time and handled some scheduling things. And at the March 7th meeting, we heard from invited guests, more equitable democracy and Oregon ranked choice voting, and heard public comment related to ranked choice voting. More equitable democracy shared historical and grounding definitions and information about elections and representation from a racial justice stance. And Oregon ranked choice voting shared what ranked choice voting is. We had some discussion about it related to public comment and also other information that in particular subcommittee co-chair Annie brought in. And at our next meeting on March 21st, we'll hear about star voting from the Equal Vote Coalition and from Catherine Thomas, shout out, who's in the room right now, about some legal questions on expanding who can vote in Multnomah County. Anything to add, subcommittee members?
And Samantha, sorry, if you can remind us, just for also folks tuning in, what subcommittee you're
Oh yeah, that's a good one. Thank you. So I'm reporting back for Subcommittee 3, also known as the Equitable Representation Subcommittee. And I'm Samantha, she, they pronouns.
This is
Timur.
Yeah,
Other questions for her?
Timur has more to add.
Beg your pardon.
Yeah, I was going to add real quick. My takeaway from the excellent presentation on ranked choice voting was that it really works well with multi-member districts. My takeaway from the speaker was that those were kind of a two combo that you see the best benefit when you do both together. And then another thing that stood out was a preference for unstaggered terms. So all for more equitable democracy, basically they said, skip the primary, have everyone elected at the same time at the presidential race. And then that's when you get the most people tuning in. That was a big equity benefit too. So yeah, those are my takeaways.
Thank you, Timur.
Thanks, Timur. And
I can
yes,
go for
Yeah.
the Safety and Justice Committee. We'll be reporting out. We were doing a lot of reading. We had some reading homework for our group. We were reviewing the budget items for the sheriff's office. We had a few articles and web links to what people in other states are doing in regards to making changes for safety and justice. At our next meeting, we will be having the auditor speak during our meeting so we can get a better idea exactly how much oversight is currently happening and what we can reasonably do within the realm of this committee to present ideas for change. So we're still kind of in a discussion spot, just gathering information and deciding where we want to go next. And
Thank you.
Donovan, if you'd like to add, or anybody, I don't know if anyone else is here from our committee, but go ahead and add whatever, if I missed something.
Yeah, I think you did a pretty good synopsis of what we've been looking at, and just considering how priorities for the county from Reimagine Oregon, which was a Black coalition of organizations that came together during the George Floyd protests, and had different agenda items for cities, Multnomah County, and the state of Oregon, how those things might be able to be influenced through the charter process. And so I've had one conversation with the director of Reimagine Oregon, because now it's turned into a project that coalesces that coalition. Oh, look at the iteration on that. And yeah, we're continuing to explore, like Nina said, other cities, like what happened in Minneapolis with question 2. And I've shared some other things with the committee regarding, some stuff in Seattle, and continuing to look at other places. So yeah, thank you all. And also, we weren't able to meet this week. Our committee wasn't able to meet because we didn't have quorum. So just to share that with you all as well.
Thank you, Nina and Donovan. Does anybody have any questions for any of the folks from any of the subcommittees? I'm hearing none, so thanks for your report outs, and we'll move to the next step.
Well, actually, I think tri-chairs, we're going to give an update on what y'all have been working on as well.
And I can get started on it too, so don't worry, Mark. So we've been getting a lot of folks from the full committee come to us just chatting about ideas, which is absolutely fantastic. So if y'all want to talk with us, shoot us an email, or with like each of the subcommittee co-chairs if you feel like that's where the avenue you want to chat with. Mark, you can provide more specifics too on what feedback we've gotten, but I know one of them is like stipends, and we're still discussing with, Multnomah County staffers about how that may be a possibility or not. And at the moment, any like suggestions we've gotten, we try to forward to the appropriate subcommittee in their co-chair with Calisi Seed. But of course, we're like as a flag that for some of us tri-chairs, there's something hitting quite too close to home right now in terms of emergencies. So like we weren't able to hunker down and talk about what do we do with the feedback that we receive and what's the avenue? Because currently there's some paths we see like have that feedback if it's received by the tri-chairs and forward it to Callie to that subcommittee co-chairs and see if that's the home they would like it to be, or bring up to the full committee during a meeting and see where they would like to move forward. So we're still need time to discuss this, and also on the values statement, so I can share that too. No, host disabled it, but the short summary of it is there are 5, like, of course, like, I want to say highlight to Allison for giving us a great start on this document. And of course, it's a living one. So if y'all are like, maybe we need to add something else or something, feel free to let us know. But currently there's 5 key values. And of course, there's more sentences diving deeper into it. But one is transparency. So idea of like people understanding how their government works, the ability to be heard by their government and having an influence on decision making, and having that clear communication with the public. The second value we've noticed is inclusive democracy. So of course, the government depends on active participation and representations of the communities people live in, and having outreach being a key part of that democracy. Third value is of, I feel like we heard it a lot too, is access and belonging. So people knowing, of course, how to access their decision makers and leaders, but also how they can feel as an active part of that decision-making process and feeling that sense of representation. So that's third one. Fourth one is the value of innovation. So of course, the past few years is definitely testing governance today, but like being able to adapt and change with the circumstances we're in. And of course, we hear that a lot as we're talking about the charter, is giving that flexibility instead of getting into nitty-gritty details, but like just trying to find that balance to give that flexibility. And then our final value that we've heard from our last meetings is idea of justice. So of course, with healing and justice being central to our governance and our Multnomah County government. And then also government extends to all people, especially those with a history of being historically underserved, marginalized, and underrepresented. So that's a huge document. I know I put a load of things onto y'all. So if y'all, I think the tri-chairs will come together after things settle with our family situation with each of us to hunker down, talk about what else we have heard for the committee too, and then share this document with you all for further feedback. But that's kind of like the framework, the bare bones of it so far. So yeah, Mark, anything I didn't cover on the tri-chair side?
I think you got it all. Thank you for that excellent roundup.
And I guess, yeah, Allison?
I was just going to ask a couple questions of the group that I've been curious of. We are a little bit ahead of schedule and we can't move to the next agenda item because our panel speakers aren't here yet. So it is a little bit of stalling, but we have this like wonderful gift of time, which is sometimes challenging to find in these kinds of meetings. So I was kind of just wondering, like, y'all are in subcommittees now. How is that going? Like, how are you feeling about that? And are there supports that you need either from each other or from staff to do what you need to do? Because I'm a little step removed and I'm curious, I'm sure y'all are talking to each other, but does it feel like the work is manageable? Does it feel really overwhelming? And is it somewhere in between? Like, how are y'all doing out there on your subcommittee work?
I don't know if someone else is talking. My screen just froze, but can you guys hear me?
Yep, we can hear you, Nina. Go ahead. Ooh, now we can't hear you, Nina. Okay, Nina, if you can hear me, we can't hear you, we can't see you, but we'll come back and check in with you. So yeah, oh, you came in briefly there, but we'll figure this out. We'll come back to Nina in a second. Maya, I see your hand, and then we'll try back again with Nina.
Yeah, I'm glad that you asked that question, because I was actually just thinking if we could use this time for any cross-issue things that would be difficult to talk about without being a quorum on an email thread. So I wanted to just throw out that the government subcommittee has decided to look at the auditor's amendments that were submitted to us. So if any of the other committees have any questions related to the auditor, I know that the Public Safety and Justice Committee had that under its topics, I think. The auditor's potential role in justice issues. And then we are also going to look at the charter review process in general and evaluating whether the process itself is long enough, if it's timed right, and so forth. So we're looking to speak with some former committee members and kind of get their take on what, after completing the whole thing, how they felt about it. So I don't, if any other committees have things that they might want us to look at, we could talk about that now, or not just our committee, but also if anyone has surveys or information they want to get out to the community engagement committee, or any cross issue items, we could use this time to talk about that.
Donovan, go for it, and then we'll come back to Nina.
We haven't gotten a chance to all meet about this yet, but I know it's been raised to y'all. I just want to voice it to the larger group. One of the things that I've thought about in terms of the charter process is that you have to be in Multnomah County to be on the charter review process, and I think this is the most populous county in the state. It's the most diverse in a state that's not diverse. And I think, the more gentrification that's been happening, the more prices continue to skyrocket, the more that people are getting pushed out of the city, particularly like Black and brown people. So what that means is with having those strict kind of rules around residency, it makes it where the process can end up being wider and wider, less and less representation or less options of who can serve on this, even if your life may be rooted ultimately in Multnomah County in terms of where you work, where you play, where your family is, all of these things, you have no say, and maybe you live in a county now just because of price that you have no political life inside of, or at least limited. So I think that's important for us to be thinking about and how we can loosen up that language. And one of the things that I shared as just kind of a place where we can visualize it in terms of policy is the preference policy, which as the government is building new housing in inner North and Northeast Portland, there's like a set of preference points that is based around your tie to the neighborhood. So no matter where you live, if you have more preference points based on your tie to the neighborhood, that gives you higher preference for access to this subsidized housing. There's a lot of problems with the preference policy itself, but I think in terms of a model to think of, that's something to keep in mind. So yeah, I wanted to share that to the entire group as well.
Nina, let's try this again.
Well, how do I follow that up? Thanks, Donovan, for sharing. You always have some good information to share. I was actually just thinking nothing too major, but I think we are starting to get like a handle on what exactly the charter consists of and what the process is, and starting to feel more comfortable in like having discussions and, problem solving and coming up with solutions. So yeah, I'm feeling really good about that. I'm new to this whole government thing. So you know, I feel like I'm finally starting to feel a little bit more comfortable in like reading the necessary documents and understanding like what we can do, what do we want to do, things like that. So yeah, there's my temperature check-in.
Nina. Yeah, let's go to Timur.
I think the subcommittee's been really great. Lots of interesting stuff, and I definitely feel like I'm on the right subcommittee for me. My comment was mainly related to just public comments and making sure they don't get lost in the abyss. And so like the one today is a good comment. I'm personally not putting much weight or energy into it because I'm more focused on the equitable representation subcommittee. And I guess my hope and expectation is I think it falls more to the safety and justice subcommittee. And I kind of assume that. So I don't know if there's a way of tracking or directing these comments of like, okay, we'll give it to this subcommittee to follow up on to take any action if necessary, but just a way to make sure things don't get lost. Or if a comment comes to a subcommittee and it doesn't really involve that subcommittee, then making sure there's a way to make it get to the right people. So just a comment about that.
I think that's a good note for the tri-chairs to discuss and make sure that we are informing everyone of the topics that are out there that might be relevant to the subcommittee to which they belong.
Naya, I see your hand. Go ahead.
Yeah, I wanted to follow up on what Donovan said. Because I think like if you were to direct that to a subcommittee, it probably would be to the government subcommittee. So Catherine, I don't want to put you on the spot, but maybe we can put a request to you to just clarify if it's within our power to make a change, like like how a lot of Portland citizen advisory boards have like the if you work, live, play in Portland, you can apply to this board. I don't know if you know the answer to this now or if it's something we can look into. Is that within our purview to change that, or is that governed by state law or anything like that?
Yeah, I think with all of these proposals, it's helpful if the subcommittees can take them up first to decide, is it something the subcommittee is actually interested in pursuing and researching? And then if it is, sort of what the specific question might be. And so if it's, can we just have anybody who's not a Multnomah County resident, or is it we want certain ties to the community, or what the proposal might be, and then we can talk about that. But I think the first step is probably for a subcommittee to look at it and decide if it's something that you're interested in, and then we can look at whether there might be any barriers or restrictions on that.
Yeah, Maya, did you want to respond? Go ahead.
Yes. I'm just gonna just a process question. So Kali, how rigid is our agenda since we're meeting tomorrow? Can we raise this in sort of new business, or does that have to be advertised as something we will be discussing?
Yeah, so there can be some flexibility in your agenda, but tomorrow night you're hearing about the charter review process in general, and that is one of the things that is written into the charter review process in the county charter. So it's very on topic with the agenda already.
Great. So timing works great then.
Yeah, and if out of that discussion you decide that's something you want, the subcommittee wants to learn more about and explore, then we can be in touch about questions for our office about that proposal.
So a couple questions out there for folks. How y'all doing? Number one. Also, to Maya's point, like any cross-pollination issues, and Maya had raised that the government subcommittee is looking at the auditor. So also if that's raising any like, hey, I'm also thinking about the auditor in this subcommittee, a great thing to raise here. And process. I think we're hearing a little bit more about charter review process is something. So yeah, Kali, go ahead.
So I will just add, having been part of the auditor's present for the auditor's presentation to the government accountability subcommittee, and knowing a little bit about what the safety and justice subcommittee is going to be focused on, I think that there is the potential to see some overlap there, because what the auditor has shared is that part of what she's asking for is around funding and increasing resources to her office so that she can conduct more audits and be able to conduct audits regularly in kind of each area of the county that, kind of each department, if department's not the right word, she used the word stream of business. I don't know if that means a lot to folks, but essentially, then she'd be able to do more audits in these different areas is the argument that she's put forward. So I just wanted to raise that as being kind of where the intersection might be, if the safety and justice subcommittee decides that it is invested in trying to, increase oversight abilities through that channel. That's probably what she's going to raise. And so I just wanted folks to be aware and mindful of that, and that it would probably be worth talking after she speaks to the safety and justice subcommittee, and maybe some thoughts develop around whether that's an avenue y'all are interested in proceeding with, about how you can work together as subcommittees to support each other and not duplicate work. So I'll keep an eye on that and just be prepared to facilitate that conversation depending on what comes out of that subcommittee meeting.
I'm hearing from folks that subcommittees are going pretty well. Is that true out there? That y'all are like getting through the work, that you're starting to dig in, you're liking it. Hopefully you're liking each other, even though that's not a requirement. Okay, you're smiling and a lot of you are nodding. So I'm guessing that's an affirmative there. Are there supports? I mean, I know Kali plays a huge role in helping to kind of keep everything together and to do some of that, connecting issues across committees, but is there, and I'm also hearing a need to be sure that we're tracking public comment and making sure that that is going to the right place and not kind of being forgotten or lost in the shuffle, which is something Mark has volunteered the tri-chairs for. Thanks, Mark. Or to help with kind of making sure public comment is getting tracked and documented to the places it needs to go for each subcommittee. But is there any other support that folks want to raise out there? Yeah, Teresa.
Well, I'm not sure about everyone, but sometimes I get so engaged in the discussions that we have that sometimes I forget if I volunteer myself or something, or if there's a next step I would need to do. So I would really appreciate it if even just a short email saying, Teresa says she would research this, and it's just little reminders right after the meeting or the day after. I don't know if that's a bit too much, but that would be a bit helpful too, to keep track of everything in the discussion.
Thanks, Teresa. Accountability. It's always awesome, mostly. Maya, go ahead.
So I don't mean to take up a lot of space, but I just wanted to say that one support item that we have requested, we're kind of waiting to hear back, is the funding to do some public outreach, because I think that portion is weighing a bit heavy on the volunteers to we all really want to get it out to our networks, but our networks are limited, and so I don't know if Danny, if you would mind just kind of talking about what you talked to us about, just report a little bit about what our options may be, even though maybe nothing's settled yet?
Yeah, I'd be happy to. So yeah, Colleen and I have been kind of both together exploring the options for securing some more funding for community outreach, because it's kind of beyond what was requested in the original budget for this. And you know, typically the counties, like when the county works with external contractors, it can be a really long and tedious process. But because this project is so time bound, we're pretty confident we'll be able to kind of get an exemption and sort of speed along being able to identify a contractor or multiple folks that we can work with to help with this. But we're really hoping to identify an outside organization or consultant who can support the community engagement subcommittee in kind of strategizing and implementing a community engagement plan, organizing focus groups. And I know the subcommittee is really also put an emphasis on making sure there's a culturally specific outreach. And so we're working right now to see if we can kind of identify a partner, because I think that'll sort of help inform how much money we need to ask for and then to go to the Board of Commissioners to get approved. I think county leadership is really supportive and knows this is an incredibly important process. So you know, I'm not that concerned about securing more funding, but I think do need to, before we do that, to kind of have some of the details worked out more. And so right now we're really just kind of exploring our options for an external partner. We did approach the Coalition for Communities of Color, because they're obviously already doing this work for City of Portland and are really familiar, and they don't have capacity, which is not that surprising. So we're exploring just some other options right now, and kind of trying to speed it along as fast as we can. But yeah, happy to answer any questions about that for folks too.
Thank you.
I want to note Maya's request in the chat. If you have suggestions for specific outreach or for surveys or groups, to let the community engagement subcommittee know. Cool. Okay, Tri-Chairs, I'm going to look to you on this one, but I'd say let's go ahead and take a break. I see that Commissioner Porta from the Portland Charter Commission is here in the room. I think Commissioner Castaneda will be joining us shortly, but why don't we take a 10-minute break? Folks can grab a snack. You can eat your dinner if it's like getting cold next to your computer screen. We'll come back at 6:26, and then we'll get into our the second part of our agenda with the commissioners. And hello, Deborah. Nice to see you in the chat. Okay, so 10 minutes. We'll see you then. You can turn your videos off, mute yourself, and see you back at 6:26.
Hey, Annie, we are taking a break and I believe we'll be back around 6:26.
Okay, thanks, Jude. Sorry I'm late.
No worries. It's nice to see you. All right, I'm gonna keep on eating over here.
Sounds good.
Hey, folks. Welcome back. It's been about 10 minutes. I hope you had a good break. Also, welcome Annie, if folks are
Hi.
listening.
Sorry,
Hello.
I'm late.
No worries. Good to see you. Welcome, welcome. Teresa, yep, back. Having a snack. Sounds good. Okay, Kali, I'm wondering actually if you want to run through a couple of announcements you have, maybe requests. You were just messaging me in the chat, so.
Yes, so I did send out an email, and thank you in advance to Mark for already having volunteered to participate in this. But I know I sent a lot of emails, so sometimes it's hard to sort through. And so I just wanted to highlight that as part of our work with communications to try and use, to use their resources to lift up the charter process and create some content that we can share out. They are interested in making a couple of short videos that they could share on social media that would focus on like what charter review is, a little bit about like what our subcommittees are focused on, why people are involved in charter review, that sort of thing. And so, yes, to move forward with that, we do need some volunteers who would be willing to be in the videos, because the best videos are going to be ones that include your faces and your voices and, can talk directly to people about why you're interested and passionate in this. An update from my email is things are going to be a little bit more restrictive in terms of availability for filming than I originally thought, just because of some resourcing limitations that they're experiencing in their office right now. So they do need to do filming in the Multnomah County building, which is over on like 5th and Southeast Hawthorne. And so they're really looking at availability on like during the day on Tuesdays and Thursdays, or potentially a Saturday during the day when they can do filming, hopefully sometime in the next week or two, so that they can work on putting that together. So you don't have to volunteer in the meeting right now, but if you're interested and willing to participate and would shoot me an email letting me know what's possible, that would be really great. And yes, I recognize that it's not everybody's thing that they want to do, and it's not always comfortable. And there may be limitations in your ability to get to the Multnomah building. All of that is perfectly understandable. But if you are willing and available, we'll work on a script together so you don't have to come up with your own things to say necessarily unless you want to. But I think it would be a really great tool to have moving forward and really help out with some of the things that you've identified wanting to do in terms of connecting with the community. So like I said, let me know if that's something you're willing to participate in. Would really appreciate that.
Timur, I saw your hand a couple of times. Were you volunteering?
It was a mistake. I tried to minimize the chat and I ended up raising my hand.
All good, all good. Just want to hold a little bit of space. Is anybody super jazzed on this and wants to volunteer right now? I feel like Danny and I are making the same expression of like.
I'd be willing to do it.
Danica, cool. Even just, a soft yes is okay. Kali can follow up. No jazz from Donovan. Okay.
I'm a
Thanks.
soft jazz, not a certain jazz, but I'm a soft jazz.
Soft jazz is better than no jazz. Thanks, Teresa. Cool. Well, something for y'all to consider. Kali, were there any other announcements for the group?
No.
Okay, cool.
I don't think
wanted to
so.
check and see. Cool.
I appreciate that.
Lots of jazz. Yes, I know. I wasn't expecting a lot of jazz, but any of you would be amazing in a video. You're all great and speak passionately and clearly about the things that you care about. It's really awesome. Okay, well, I will be introducing our final agenda topic, and I want to welcome Commissioner Castaneda and Commissioner Porta from the Portland Charter Commission, and we're going to spend some time, really the last hour of our meeting, talking with both of you. And I recognize like folks have got stuff going on, and Anthony and Deborah are also like extremely busy, I would say right now, and have a lot of responsibilities when it comes to Portland Charter. So if we don't take the full hour, I think that that's okay. But I know that this group has expressed a lot of interest in hearing a little bit more. So I have a couple of questions that I can use to get us started that the tri-chairs helped to develop. So I'll kind of put my moderator hat on for this meeting and give each of our visiting commissioners some questions, but also to our committee members here for the Multnomah County Committee. I'll be looking for your hands. You can drop questions into the chat. And if I don't need to moderate, I will fade into the background and just let you all have more of a natural conversation. So with that, maybe Commissioner Castaneda, or I think you are Co-Chair Castaneda as your official title right now, and Commissioner Porta, maybe you can each introduce yourselves and tell us a little bit like just who you are and also your work and the roles that you've played with the Portland Charter Commission thus far. So whoever would like to go first, you can like look at each other and decide, or just unmute.
It looks like I'm going first. Hello, everyone. Good evening. Again, thanks for giving us this opportunity to come speak to you. My name is Anthony Castaneda. I use he, him, el pronouns. I'm currently the co-chair through the end of this month on the Portland Charter Commission. Previously I've worked in policy development, campaigning, ballot measures. Most recently, I was working on the preschool for all measure in Multnomah County, so I have a lot of thoughts about the Multnomah County Charter as well. But I know that I think this is a great opportunity just to kind of brainstorm and share, between our great commissions. Thank you. I'll pass it over to Deborah.
Thanks, Anthony. Thanks for having us. My name is Deborah Porta, use she, her, and I'm on the Portland Charter Commission. I work in the nonprofit world. I've been in Portland since 1997. I'm originally from Dallas, Texas. I have been involved in the city in multiple ways for the last 15, 20 years. And I'm very excited actually to have this conversation and go from there.
Well, I'll start it off with a question that maybe seems really easy, but might be actually be more nuanced. In like, how's it been going? How has the process been going for both of you commissioners? And what's it been like? And maybe just give this group a flavor of how it's been going.
Who can go first? Well, how much time do we have? I mean, it's been a really great process. I have the very first thing that struck me and has stayed with me is in all of the things that I've ever been engaged in the city, in Oregon, whatever, I've never seen such a diverse group of people come together in this city to do anything, really, especially this kind of work. It's been long in coming, in my opinion, and that is actually probably one of the most inspiring things for me, being part of this process and sticking with it. There are definitely a lot of bumps, but it's really about the best part of the whole thing has been the ability to meet and work with so many different kinds of people who are just as equally committed to making a better city as the next person over. It's been an interesting process. You learn a lot about what kind of institutional memory has kept in our processes and how much is not. There's been quite a bit of, I think the most surprising thing was very early on, kind of basically having to create our own structure as to how we were going to function. Obviously, there's a framework inside of the charter and all that, but there was actually really very little detail about, okay, how do we do this thing? How do we make decisions? What are the rules that we're going to play by with each other? All of that. So there was a whole chunk of time in the beginning just devoted to figuring out how we were going to do what we were going to do, much less talk about what we were going to do. And I know that that weighed on a lot of us. That's one of our priorities for when we're finished. What will we want to leave behind for the next iteration of the Charter Commission? And I'll just leave it there at this point.
Yeah, I'll echo what Deborah was saying and just add that I think that we have a very unique opportunity, and fortunately we've been resourced as a commission by the council, and that's really something that didn't happen in the past, and there's really a desire from council as well to change the form of government and city council elections. So I think there's been a lot of momentum, and also the public has been incredibly receptive to the ideas. I think if we're looking, talking about ranked choice voting 10 years ago, I think there would have been a different reaction compared to the reaction that we're getting today. And I think that this is true for all stakeholders, whether it's, big business, whether it's small business, whether it's neighborhood associations or community-based organizations. There's been a lot of ideas and folks raising their concerns in a way that's been very productive, at least for us. And also we've had a lot of experts come out, folks who are PhDs in, government reform. And I think that's been something that has been very beneficial in helping us legitimize some of the concepts that we're talking about.
Thanks to both of you. Committee members? Again, hands, chat questions, unmute if you do have any questions or want to dive a little deeper. Okay, so Anthony and Deborah, you both, the Portland Charter Commission had a very big meeting last week where you had unlimited public comment. I know a couple of our Multnomah county committee members were present to that meeting, but the Portland group did give a roundup of some of the things that you are considering so far and where you have areas of consensus. And I'm wondering, for the folks who weren't able to tune into that and haven't heard the latest, can you give an update on some of the things that your committee is considering, especially knowing that there will likely be some overlap with this group as well?
I think Anthony could probably summarize that better than I can.
Yes. So we have 3 areas of agreement that we've landed on. And the first is removing counselors from the day-to-day business of bureaus. So that's, the way that we understand that is a commissioner form of government. So completely doing away with that. The second area of agreement is adopting some sort of voting method that allows for a result in one election. In other words, eliminating the primary election. And so of course there's nuance in all those areas of agreement. And if you listen to yesterday's, I'm getting my days mixed up. So if you listen to yesterday's conversations, we really went into the nuance of that area. Because another area was whether we wanted to stagger those elections if we decide to move to results in one election. And then the third area of agreement is moving to some form of geographic representation in the form of multi-member districts or single-member districts.
Thanks, Anthony. That was a very succinct roundup. Yeah, Timur, go for it.
Have y'all had conversations about partisan elections? I recall I was listening to one of the recordings from a subcommittee for the city charter, and one of the experts was recommending doing away with nonpartisan elections and having municipal elections be partisan, thereby encouraging parties to run candidates and do the work. And just, they were noting that some of this happens organically anyway.
Mm-hmm. I can take, or Deborah, I saw you unmute.
The easy answer to that is that we haven't been considering moving away from nonpartisan elections. I remember that being brought up, but it's not currently a significant consideration that we're working with.
I think one of our desired outcomes was increasing representation, and I think that's true for across the political spectrum, and I think that's as far as we've gotten into like having a partisan or nonpartisan conversation.
Samantha, go ahead.
Thank you. So I'm curious related to the concept of districts and like the agreement of that, or thinking about geography-based districts. I know that both of our commission heard about what would you say, like more equitable democracy came as guests. And I know that's something that they shared is that for increasing minority representation, geography-bound districts don't always achieve that because of the ways that people are pushed around in this city, depending on rent, income, gentrification, all of that. So is there alignment among the committee that geography-based districts can provide more racial equity outcomes for the city?
I definitely want Anthony to weigh in on this, but I will say the phrase geographic district is a little bit of a misnomer in terms of what we're considering, because no matter what, districts will be some level of geographic, because it's all based on equitable distribution of population, number wise, not identity wise. That's why Portland is a little difficult, because our identities are spread all over the city. So in using that phrase, it's not the district goals that we have, understanding that we aren't going to be the ones drawing the districts. That's an after process. But our goals are exactly that equitable representation, understanding that the just simply drawing districts as a whole will involve some level of geographic element, simply because that's how districts are drawn. They're not necessarily, we're not talking about drawing, okay, there's East Portland, Southwest Portland, and Sellwood. Kind of, it's not that thinking. It's because it's all based on population. And so the questions that we're looking at now are, okay, if we're looking at multi-member districts or single member, how many districts are we looking at to reach those equity goals for representation? And so that could end up with an East Portland, or maybe it ends up with 2 East Portlands, or we really won't know that answer. And this came up last night. Getting the more accurate, solid data for where people live will actually determine a lot of how districts are drawn. But in our work and in our processing, it's not geographic districts for the sake of geographic districting. It's just recognizing that on some level that's going to happen anyway, but it's about the distribution of population.
Thank you. That's helpful. And yeah, Anthony, if you have anything to add, I'd be happy to hear it too.
Yeah, I think there's groups that came out on both sides when we're thinking about the geographic representation. And one thing that was made clear was that need for proportional representation. So each district should have more or less the same amount of folks within those boundaries. And we heard arguments on both sides for single-member districts as well as multi-member districts, and kind of what are the pros and cons of each as well. And I think that's kind of how we began to really explore the multi-member districts, was based on some of the expert research that was presented to us through more equitable democracy. We had it feels like a while ago, but I know that we had a few professors come to us as well, folks who are researching those sort of like city models, and how does voter turnout translate into like representation. And I think one thing that is difficult to control for, kind of going back to that partisan question as well. Portland has its own political culture and norms, and I think that's something that we've been trying to try not to put so much into the charter to control the political culture and norms, because ultimately we're looking at the skeleton of the city at the end of the day.
Thank you.
Maya, go ahead.
First I just wanted to say it's such an interesting point about identities being spread out all over the city, and I don't think I've heard anyone make that point before. So very good and very thought-provoking point that I'll be thinking about. I just wanted to take the opportunity to ask, since you're here and one of the things that we as a committee will be looking at is our charter review process and whether we have enough time, because our process is significantly shorter than yours. So I'm curious if you have thoughts. So I'm looking at the timeline here because I'm kind of almost, it's a bit of a blur, but we get selected in August, and by August the next year, by sort of somewhere between June and August, we're kind of supposed to be done, even though things can happen, but we have about a year to do it all. And like you said, there's a lot of stuff that happens at first, where your agreements and your values, and you're not meeting that often, you're establishing your subcommittees. That's kind of where we are now, and we don't have a lot of time to dig into our issues. So I'm curious if you have, that you've been at this for a long time now, and your process is longer. What's your view of the amount of time that we have, and whether that's sufficient to do a review? And also, do you see benefits to our process overlapping with yours, like it does right now? It doesn't always, but right now it does. Or do you see more benefits to our respective processes wrapping up, so that we can kind of say, Portland Charter Commission did this and put this on the ballot, should we consider it for Multnomah County? So I made the mistake of two questions there in one, but would love to hear your perspectives.
Yeah, I would say that very early on, when we began our exploring the issues that we wanted to discuss, I think we had around 18 different issues that we could have focused on, and we quickly realized that we weren't going to be able to deliver on form of government and elections if we decided to focus on those other issues. And admittedly, I think there was a lot of, there's like community organizations and folks who had come to us who are likely upset and are going to continue to be upset with us because we didn't take up those issues. And, we broke this up into 2 cycles as well. We said that, anyone can come to us during the public hearing comments and still advocate for their issue. But we had to draw the line and say, we are only, if we were going to make any decisions, we're only going to focus on these 2 areas. So that's why we broke it up into 2 issue areas. And then anything that is after this, after we make our vote and we begin to take up other issues, we're probably going to narrow in. So I guess my recommendation would be that identify 1 or 2 areas and just focus on those 2. I think also, if I'm understanding correctly, if you make a recommendation or propose an amendment, would that be on the 2023 ballot? or would it be on this ballot as well, the 2022? Oh, okay. Yeah, I think that's the other thing, the political feasibility. So there's less voter turnout in 2023, most likely.
I would echo what Anthony said about, when we were early on identifying all these, there's so many different places we could have started, and so much to do. And even as we narrowed down in the two element, this phase 1 and phase 2 process that we're following, the two primary issue areas of form of government and elections, even those were chosen based on understanding that next to nothing else that was on this laundry list of issues was going to really be able to be addressed in any significant way without addressing these structural issues. And so we kind of narrowed in on that to start. And then as time has gone on, there is that reality check of, in the very beginning, everyone's very gung-ho and rambunctious, and we're just going to change the world and everything is going to happen all at one time. And then we're like, well, not so much. To get realistic about we had this conversation a few meetings ago of getting realistic about when we're finished, what's the impact we want to have as a commission, and what do we want to ensure we're most able to accomplish. And at the end of the day, we're not going to be able to accomplish a list of 18 different things. These are large structural issues that can't be fixed in one go around or in even a 2-year cycle. If y'all are I'm from Texas, if y'all are on a 1-year cycle, that's kind of scary. Maybe that's one of the things that the county should think about is how long should your actual cycle be? I also wonder, I understand the larger turnout in sort of alternating elections in November. And at the same time, it also feels a little bit potentially intimidating to have so much change on Multnomah County residents' ballots, because we have that conversation even amongst ourselves about what we're doing for Portlanders. And I wonder about the potential for, okay, we're going to do all this change all at one time in one election that maybe folks have not had enough time to engage in. Like going back to that question about how to time things. So I wonder if that comes to mind for me, even as a voter, of like, what are we actually really looking at? How much change can voters handle all at one time?
Let's go to Mark, and then Timur also has a question.
All right, thank you. I think what you've just described for your effort is a design for the review process that sort of anticipates incremental change as opposed to large scale change on a number of fronts. And that sort of makes me wonder, and has made some of us wonder, how often or how continuous should the change in charters be? Whether it should happen every 5 years or every 10 years, that's a big difference in the time frame. And so a lot of time can pass when things that are destructive to the government's purpose can go unresolved. I know for Multnomah County, we have this 6-year cycle. It just happens that we're coinciding with you. And of course, yours is a 10-year cycle. Can you just address that question about, would it be more valuable to be able to have a commission that meets more often? Or
I think that's an interesting question. I think some of the desire to, for example, like grow the city council in the city of Portland, is that the council size has not changed since 1913, which interestingly, in 1913, the council was 15 members. So we're almost doing like a 180 if we're thinking about like the size that the size we want to go to now. So yeah, so I think it does raise an interesting point, like um, how often does the county kind of run into a bottleneck with its charter? Is the charter a barrier to achieving outcomes for the county? I think that's an interesting question. I think that's a question for the city of Portland as well, as business continues to innovate. There's going to be new challenges. I know that I've had another separate conversation with Maya on this about kind of just. I remember the first time that those e-scooters were introduced to the city of Portland, and that was such a nightmare for the city to handle, because the city was just not equipped to interact with a business that was that kind of model. And we've seen that with Lyft and Uber as well. I think they've made improvements to those services and how they can work with the city and the existing infrastructure and bureaus. But I think we're going to continue to run into those problems as the city continues to change or innovate or change demographically as well. Yeah.
I'm not sure if I have a strong answer, because I think I'd want it to be a little bit more informed. But knowing that, at least for the city of Portland, this process won't even begin again for now almost 10 more years, because any changes that come from it are then again, this implementation period has to happen. And that feels slow and daunting in terms of that we put a lot of pressure on ourselves, especially in the beginning, to recognize that there's this feeling of once in a lifetime chance to do something, because the chance won't come again for at least 10 years. At the same time, I think it should be balanced with recognizing that government, as nimble as it could be in some ways, it's also designed not to move very quickly, because rash decisions bring rash results. So I don't know exactly what I think that balance is. I think 10 years is too long, but I think 5 or 6 years might be too short. Yeah, somewhere in between, honestly, is probably where I would fall.
Also, thank you, Anthony and Deborah, the commissioners, for very eloquent answers. And I also want to recognize that there are probably 15 different perspectives in the room, even with our committee members as well. And you're kind of asked to opine on these things that you are kind of directly informed by your own process and working on the Portland process for over a year. And there's probably a lot of nuance in there too. So thank you for just putting it out there. Let's go to Donovan and Timur. I think you were deferring your question to let some other folks go. So we'll go Donovan, and then Timur's waiting in the wings.
Can everyone hear me?
Yep, sure can.
I was just wondering, you said you had like 15 plus topics that you were considering before you landed on the ones that you're exploring now. I'm co-chairing the Public Safety Committee with Nina, and I'm wondering if there were any topics specifically on the criminal justice front that y'all were considering, and how far along those things might have went. And I recognize that you two may not have all the answers in this moment, so don't feel pressured either.
I think if I remember correctly, per our last public engagement report, I think around 5% of responses were related to public safety, and I think they range from the less ambitious to the more ambitious. Anything from more calls for like accountability to dissolving the current police bureau. So I think there's been a range of views expressed on that topic. Unfortunately, we didn't get further than that, because I think as we started to form committees and issues around it, we kind of recognized our own capacity. And I think we wanted to stay friends and connected as a commission in the long term. So we had to go back to those two issues. Yeah, I wish I had more to share, but I think that was the big piece, was that we quickly realized that we had to just kind of focus on those two areas, as per the reasons why Deborah gave.
I think I'll just add that, early on when we were identifying all of our various issues that we sort of walked through the door with, and this was before public comment had begun, public input. Public safety was definitely in there. There were questions asked about, what role can the charter play in addressing the city's relationship with its police department and this kind of stuff. And none of the issues that were put on the table have been taken off the table. Again, we're in this space where these two large overarching things that have so much impact on these other issues is where we chose to start to make it the most doable and the most impactful. But again, I'll add to Anthony's point. It was actually, and has continued to be, a little surprising given media coverage, how little community prioritizing for public safety and more police or less police or whatever the case may happen to be in the public commentary that we have received from all the different, whether it's, email direct commentary in a meeting or email sent or the listening sessions, whatever the case may be. Issues, especially issues specific to the police, have been actually really far down the list of public comment. Public safety as a whole is not that much higher, really. The public has been really consistent about its top 2 or 3 issues. And those are in alignment with where we've been focusing our time.
Thank you. Yeah, that is really helpful. I know we're trying to still figure out what topics are best for us. And in the Multnomah County Charter, there's like very little detail in terms of the sheriff's role. It's pretty bare bones. And so we're trying to see if that presents more opportunity to impact what their role should look like and could look like. Everything from budgets to evictions to, I heard you say that some people would even talk about the dissolution of PPB in favor of something else. So all of those things are helpful to hear.
Timur, go for it.
Cool, thanks. I'll start with a comment, which has been kind of on my mind lately, is that I do think maybe after this process, we need some sort of like advocacy organization of like something or a group that can respond to the media when like questions come up about like this process. Like I'm thinking of Metro did a T2020. There was a whole bunch of stakeholders and advocates about getting Metro to have their $5 billion regional package to be equitable and climate friendly. And then they did that. And then some of those same people then led an advocacy organization called Getting There Together, made up of like Oregon Walks and other things that kind of helped do the campaign arm of it a little bit. So just a thought, because I think this impacts both commissions, that we need to have a story to tell about explaining this concisely to voters about what they're voting on and why it makes the city and county better. So that's my comment. And then the second thing is a question. I guess where y'all at with number of commissioners, because I saw that Michael Latner presentation and basically to the City Charter Commission, and he was talking about cities of comparable size to Portland have somewhere between 50 and 80 city commissioners in Europe. And obviously the county has an even higher population. And I think there was some discussions about how this also makes it more equitable as well, having more commissioners. And so this is something I'm very interested in, and just want to see what the latest is with you all on that.
I can go first, Deborah, unless you want to go first. Yeah, I think it's I've from my own personal view, I was receptive to the idea of growing the council beyond kind of where we're kind of the range that we're heading in. Most of the public comment is has a different idea. And then so I think if we're trying to be responsive to the folks that are coming forward and through our work with CCC as well, when we throw out bigger numbers, folks tend to like lean back and try to like absorb that. And I think it's not because we disagree with the advocacy group that's coming forward with that information. I think it's a fantastic idea. Yeah, I think it's just been it's been hard to communicate that to the public and to communicate the value. Because one thing that we're also weighing with that is how do we ensure that city councilors are paid enough to be doing their roles so that we're attracting a very like diverse, qualified group of candidates to those roles. So when we're getting into those numbers, if we're talking about like even 30, we're looking at salaries that are that might be relatively low in comparison to other cities. And there's also, when we looked at the research, there's really no correlation in the US in terms of like population and the size of city council. So there's like all the cities with a similar population as Portland kind of have their own range and their own reasons as to why they have those, like that number of councilors. Yeah, I hope that kind of helps understand some of those, kind of some of the reasoning as to why we've landed on that range that we have now. So I think it was between 15 and 16. Oh no, I'm sorry, 12 and 16 is kind of where we're honing in on.
Right. One of the things that comes up consistently for us is like thinking about the number of counselors can't really be thought of separate from this other discussion about district representation and whether single district, multiple representation, multi-member, sorry. And just the interaction of all of these areas that we're considering because they impact each other. And so none of them really sort of stand on their own as issues to focus on, because deciding the number of districts impacts the size of council. And so it's not so much about we like having 15 counselors. It's does that achieve our representation goals with the districting or multi-member, single, whatever that looks like. And so it's not a standalone number. We are definitely having conversations about, because there's a whole pragmatic side to all of this that honestly we don't get to ignore. Is, two issues. A, what's the budgetary impact for anything that we're changing? And that's not to say, woo, that's hard on the budget, we can't do it. It's we need to know and be informed and make informed decisions because we have to be able to explain that to the public. Which leads to this other piece of recognizing it's not so much about incremental, because honestly, changing our form of government is not an incremental change. But it is about, one of the, as Anthony pointed out earlier, some of these changes haven't happened in over 100 years. There's reasons for that. This stuff gets shot down in the city of Portland. They tried to do changes back in the last commission, but it's, if there's work that goes into getting the public to actually be ready for that change and open to it, And so it does become a really big discussion about how much can we actually accomplish in one go around and get it to actually move. And, you know, I know, as Anthony mentioned, there aren't really any major correlations in terms of like looking at city size and the size of their council, but they kind of fall into a range generally. There aren't a whole lot of councils that I've come across so far that run into this 30, 40, 50 and more, because that can become an unwieldy something. That's another topic that's come up, is how much can the council actually support in terms of the number of members? So that's why it's not a direct answer, honestly. We have sort of fallen on this range that most of us are comfortable with, but we're still figuring that out in conjunction with all the rest of it.
Then I see your hand, go ahead.
I've heard you talking about data a little bit. Can you talk about what your approach to research? Oh, did you say someone else? I said somebody said.
No.
But yeah, what your approach to research has been during this process will be helpful. Research and data.
Yeah, I think considering the desire for change, there is research that we can rely on, and organizations that came forward to begin to kind of probe at some of the concepts that we began to approach. For example, there's a City Club report that came out a year prior, I think, to our commission forming. And that was research done, a year prior to that report's release, to really begin to explore these ideas. And I think we're able to kind of fall back on those areas and then do some more literature review on those topics. For example, like the multi-member districts, that was something that was discussed in the City Club report, and also was able, and so they had citations that we can then follow and begin to explore those individually. And I think every single commissioner has kind of done their research in different ways, aside from like the experts that have come to us. In our smaller work groups, during discussion, we had brought forward the pros and cons for a lot of the concepts using our own individual research with support from like the city staff. And then so there's also other organizations like Sightline Institute. Right when we started, they came out with like everything you want to ask about the charter, but too afraid to ask. So there's like some good like pieces that were like help motivating us as well.
Yeah, there's basically I think the approach, excuse me, that we've taken to data and input and this sort of expert analysis and research is this combination of, because as soon as the process started, all of the experts on something decided they needed to talk to us. And part of the process was a little bit of, obviously listening and we're going to listen to what people bring to us. And then balancing that with also doing some of our own research, whether it's talking to other people in the same field, others from other cities, doing literally physically our own, literature reviews, that kind of stuff. Because in all honesty, there's a lot of agenda behind a lot of data. And so parsing out, sort of digging into that and balancing it with different sources. Like there's nothing that we've landed on or are coming to agreement on has been informed by a single source. Let's put it that way. It's all a multitude of different reports, different sources, different regions, different all of these things, and we've had lots of meetings with educators, academic folks, about the history of certain things. There are a lot of, I say a lot, there are some really significant associations here in Oregon. There's and I'm gonna, Dr. Phillips will kill me for forgetting the names, but there's the Oregon County of Associations, for lack of, I don't think that's the proper name, but there are these associations with lots and lots of data and lots of reports and research about government structure at the county level, the city level, the state level. And those have been super helpful for a lot of folks who don't normally delve into these issues.
Annie, I saw your hand earlier. Did you have a question or comment?
Yeah, I think Deborah kind of answered my question, but there's maybe a nuance on it. Just kind of continuing on that same subject of doing research. I think one of the challenges that we've run into in our subcommittees is, we have maybe an hour and a half to meet, and how do we spend that time? And, I think our initial thought was, oh, we'll invite people to come, expert speakers come and tell us things, and then we can learn and go from there. But then that doesn't really give us a lot of time for discussion and, other kinds of things. So I guess I'm just kind of curious about, for you, how has your process evolved in terms of how you spend that time that you do have together, and how do you utilize time apart, given public meeting rules? We can't meet separately without public notice, but individuals can do research on their own. So how do you balance all of that?
Well, this brings up one of the very first things that we learned is, I remember when we were first received the notice of appointment, and there's this breakdown, well, how much time is it going to take and all this, and it says about 8 hours a month, and that went out the door pretty quick. So really and truly, most of our subcommittee meetings are actual full charter commission meetings. That's not where people are coming to present. There was some of that early on, but really it was all other meetings specific. For example, if we wanted to, there's a political science professor at PSU who was part of another presentation that a commissioner got wind of and invited me and some others to. And so we went and attended and took the notes at this other thing because it wasn't a commission meeting. And then the commission staff, the city staff, have worked really, really hard to connect us to as many sources as possible. And those are other meetings outside of the commission meetings. I have these stakeholder meetings that we've been doing have been super, super helpful. Some of the best interaction of the entire process, in my opinion. And they're usually about an hour, and I'm doing, 2 or 3 or 4 of those a month on top of the meetings and the commissioner meetings and that sort of thing. There is a lot of on your own research, but what we end up doing is we share it with each other, especially if it's subcommittee level. And then in our meetings, we really focus on, early on, it was definitely what are we finding? What are we learning? What are we hearing? A lot of it was, what are we hearing from the community? And then focus has more zeroed in now on where are we on what it is that we think we want to do. But the sort of expert input and that kind of stuff has been a combination of people testifying, public testimony during the commission meetings. That's been a big part. A lot of people have submitted reports, they'll email it to us, that kind of thing. And then a whole host of separate meetings.
Donovan, I see your hand as well. Commissioners, I also want to raise a question about community engagement that Deborah, you just kind of alluded to. So I'm going to put a post-it on that. But Donovan, go ahead.
Sorry, I'm not trying to take a whole lot of space, but I have been wanting to connect with y'all. And Deborah, you know, I was just trying to connect with you. So I am trying to get all my questions answered. But we actually were just having a conversation before you all joined on about public comment, and sorting public comment as, you know, they kind of come in, and not letting them land in a dead zone. Mark specifically was raising that. So I'm wondering if y'all had any specific approaches to public comment and making sure topics stayed alive. And again, I know y'all have chosen specific, like 2 specific areas, so it might be a little bit less relevant, but yeah.
In terms of public, because we had that concern early on too, of how do we not lose track of what people are telling us. And you know, we have it. There are a couple of 2 incredibly productive staff people who keep us all wrangled, you know. And one of the things that Sophia does is monitor the public comment, and she I know there's a more complicated word, but she sections it. She's like, what's the topic? What's the general? What are they commenting about? We get copies of all the comments because they're public. Anyone can access those, but we also get them. And then Sophia provides us with a breakdown of the topic areas so that it's easy for us to digest. What are people talking to us about? And she does that regularly. It's at least a couple of times a month, I think, that she'll send us that report to so that we can stay on top. And we can always access it anytime we want, but in that report is super helpful for organizing the information for us, because it can become super overwhelming to try and do that ourselves along with everything else. But really it's just she's documenting, recording, and then segmenting for us so that we can stay aware of what is it that's coming our way.
And I'll just add that, I think we early on as well, we got it to a point where we realized that we were just oversampling and we weren't driving the conversation further. So I think figuring out points in your own discussions and your own issues where you need to pivot and begin to move towards like a decision, so that you're not just getting the same response from the public. And this was something that was true for our community listening sessions when we were going to organizations, was when we were just asking about, city, mayor, council form of government, or council, city manager. When we just presented those 2 options, we can only, we weren't diving into like, what were people really asking, or what are people really looking for? And then so through like deeper conversations, we found like threads of the need for continuity, when working with professional staff, someone who understands community needs. Another one was the need for accountability. So I think at some point, figuring out like when to change the questions that you're asking the public.
Maybe on that line, can you tell us a little bit more about how community engagement has been going? I know that was a question that we had in the back pocket for folks. And I think specifically, any takeaways that you've learned from engaging the community throughout this process, and maybe anything that's worked really, really well that you'd recommend that this group maybe try to either mirror or recreate. Deborah, go for it.
The most important takeaway for me is kind of going back to what I said earlier about we're all super optimistic in the beginning, because we just know the entire city is paying just as much attention as we are, of course. Not to underestimate the actual amount of real work involved to get people engaged in the process. Even folks with extensive networks, you know, the vast majority of people are not paying attention to this unless they understand that it's important to pay attention to. And, you know, we kind of hit that realization sometime back around like this needs to come up on the radar for us in terms of engaging people. And also sort of similar to what Anthony was saying about taking some ownership of the dialogue itself, of, you know, us speaking more as a commission and engaging with people. The stakeholder listening sessions that we've been doing, I think I mentioned, though, I have found those to be the most impactful and productive in terms of hearing from people. Public comment is always impactful. It's just, there's a lot of it all at one time. And so you can't absorb it very well. And 2 or 3 minutes doesn't allow for any kind of conversation. These community stakeholder meetings, which are really sort of organizational focused, have been really useful because we've been able to have, you know, 2 or 3 commissioners and 2 or 3 people from an organization or a organizing body to actually have a dialogue for an hour, to really delve into what are you hearing from folks? What are you talking about? What are your priorities? What are you, because these are the folks connected to their communities. And so I highly recommend investing in that process. And it is time consuming. You know, Donovan, I cannot say that off the top of my head. I know that in the last budgetary, I've forgotten what it's called, basically the bump that Portland does in the fall, we were approved and specifically for being able to increase our community engagement budget. I cannot quote the exact number on that.
Anthony, oh yeah, go for it.
No, yeah, I don't have much more to add to what Deborah was saying. I think, yeah, I think that the important thing was to identify those two, you know, the 2 issues you want to focus on, and then engage the stakeholders within those 2 issues. I think we've done a great job of reaching out to community members, you know, as well as, you know, downtown business, you know, reaching out to some of the other like labor stakeholder groups. So I think that has allowed us to kind of get as far as we have within the scope that we set for ourselves, and just say, yeah, continue to drive the conversation forward. I think when I was talking about that, the time when we needed to pivot was we felt that we had stagnated. Like it felt like we weren't getting anywhere, and so we just had to like create more conversation and just you know, put something else in the news, for the lack of a better term, right?
Okay, it is 7:29. Commissioner Castañeda and Commissioner Porta, thank you so much for coming today, for just your thoughtful answers, for your time, and yeah, for being here with folks. Oh yeah, there's the kudos in the chat. Thanks, y'all. Okay, tri-chairs, I'm gonna pass it to you if you have any. Mark, Anna, Teresa, any closing words for folks?
Well, just want to say once again, thank you, Anthony and Deborah, for being here. I know everyone really enjoyed it. And with like this whole panel discussion, the main really next steps I feel like, and the tri-chairs can correct me on this, just let this presentation soak in and let that guide you where you need it for whatever your subcommittee work and eventually our full committee work will be. And I think the tri-tiers, we definitely have our own discussions on our side on value statement, and then talking about how to move public comment and any other suggestions from the full committee into the appropriate subcommittees too. So that's on the agenda. And I know our next meeting is on April 20th. So we'll see you all next month. But Mark, Anna, anything y'all need to add to?
Well, I'd like to thank you both as well. It was probably the most instructive thing I think that when we've heard from outside. So really, really helpful to me to learn how your process is going and some of the roadblocks you run into, and the way you've resolved some of those, and how the importance of the most important information is what's driving you towards your decisions this year. So thank you for what you're doing. And
also, thank you so much for your comments and for your contributions to our process. At this point, it's very helpful. So just echoing that, thank you so much.
I was in the. Cool. Okay, folks. Big thank yous. We'll see you on the 20th of April. Anthony and Deborah, we'll see you soon. Take care. All the best, folks. Bye.
Thanks. Bye.